Hi, Todd Orchide here with GTL Real Estate. Wanted to send you a quick message going over the recent economic downturn, the coronavirus scare, and how this might impact your rental property. So obviously, if you've been watching the news at all or reading the newspaper, you're aware of what's been going on the last several weeks with the coronavirus outbreak, and you're also aware probably of what has taken place with the stock market the last week or so. We've quickly gone from a bull market to a bear market on the stock market. Obviously, the stock market is not an indicator of the overall economy. As someone who was an econ major, I can certainly tell you that. However, the overall economic indicators are also not looking good right now. We have some serious situations with the travel industry, with the hospitality industry, education. There's just a lot of things going on. If you were watching the news yesterday, you probably saw that the United States announced a suspension for a month on travel from Europe. There was also a cancellation of or a suspension of the NBA season. The NCAA tournament will be held without spectators. Conferences across the country are being canceled, including very large, tens of thousands of people conferences like the South by Southwest Conference. There's a whole lot going on, and all of this is troubling. It's going to lead to people not getting their paychecks. It's going to lead to some people losing their jobs. There's already starting to be word getting out of people who work at some of these large sporting venues who are getting pink slips. They're losing their jobs. So obviously this is a serious situation. When anything like this happens, when there is a large-scale economic downturn, whether you think it's justified or not, obviously we all have a lot of different opinions on whether the coronavirus is actually something significant enough to justify all of this. But regardless of what your opinion is on that, the real effect of it at this point is basically impossible to ignore. And especially those of us in Atlanta. I know a lot of our clients own properties in Atlanta. That's our largest market. That's a market that is heavily dependent upon the travel industry. And even for our customers in Florida, the cruise industry is also something that's going to be heavily affected by this. So, in the markets where we do business, all of this is going to be very significant, especially in Atlanta where the airline industry is so big. Delta Airlines obviously has a fortress hub in Atlanta with tens of thousands of employees. Southwest Airlines, my former employer from before I was in property management, I was a pilot at Southwest, and they have a small base in Atlanta, which came from my former airline, AirTran Airways. A lot of those people still live there. Probably thousands of people working for Southwest are in Atlanta. So, obviously, with all of this and the impact that it's having on the travel industry, that's going to have a significant impact on the Atlanta economy and also on Florida, where it's so heavily dependent upon tourism, cruises, and everything else. So for all of our customers in both of our states, this is a significant issue, something we have to think about. So what is going to happen when your tenant loses their job, or their hours get cut back, or they get furloughed temporarily, whatever the case may be, and they're not getting rent, or they're not getting money to pay their rent, then how is that going to impact you? Obviously, it's significantly. You depend upon their rent income to pay your mortgage in many cases. Most of our clients don't own their properties outright. They do have to pay a mortgage. So this is something we have to think about. So how do we prepare for that? Well, there are different ways to prepare for it. Hopefully you have money set aside in case something like that happens, in case we have to evict the tenant for non-payment, and in case there is a vacancy for a period of time because of the downturn. Hopefully you have money set aside to deal with that. But for many of you, you don't. There's a lot of landlords do not have reserves set aside, and the rent income that comes in pays their mortgage. So in that case, how do you protect yourself? Well, we do have an option to help protect you for that. That we have a product called SureVestor Landlord Protection Insurance. It is underwritten and backed by Lloyd's of London, which is one of the largest insurance companies in the world, one of the most trusted insurers. And that product basically gives you protection in that case. If a tenant skips out or a tenant has to be evicted, there's coverage for that. And there's different levels of coverage, but basically up to 2 months worth of rent coverage is available in case that situation comes up and your tenant doesn't pay their rent. So we have that product available. It's an upgraded package we can give you. But the key to this is, and this is why I'm sending you this video now, is that it has to be in place before the situation comes up. So, just like with car insurance, you can't buy car insurance after you've had the car accident. The same is true of landlord protection insurance. You cannot buy the landlord protection insurance after your tenant has stopped paying the rent. You have to have the insurance in place beforehand while the tenant is still current on their rent. So, April rent is coming up due here in about 3 weeks. Those people who are getting laid off or having their hours cut back because of this financial crisis, those people will start to feel the effects by then. And you might have tenants who are not paying their rent in April because of what's going on. Now, I'm not trying to say that this is going to be all tenants or even most tenants or maybe even a large percentage of them, but there are going to be tenants who are not paying their rent because of this situation. So you may be one of the landlords that's impacted by that. If that would be a financial burden on you, now is the time to deal with that by getting the insurance in place so that it's there before April rolls around and that tenant doesn't pay their rent. Because if April comes around, the tenant doesn't pay their rent and they're behind, it's too late at that point to get the insurance. We can't do it then. We have to do it beforehand. So if this is a situation that would be a burden on you, if you want to get that protection in case that comes to be, then all you have to do is send me a reply to this email. Let me know that you want to get your plan upgraded to that higher package. And we have several different packages available to you. Just let me know and I can send you the pricing on those. It would be more expensive, of course, than your standard management agreement that you have right now, but we're not talking significantly so. We're talking, $20, $30, $40 a month. It depends on what level of coverage you get and what you're currently paying, if you have any discounts or anything going right now. But $40 a month obviously would be a small price to pay to avoid a situation where your tenant isn't paying their rent and now you're in a bind because you need to pay the mortgage and you don't have the money coming in. So if that would be a situation for you, let me know. We can get that insurance purchased for you. Now, just so you know, the way that insurance works, if the tenant does have to be evicted for non-payment, then after the tenant is evicted, that's when you get paid out that rent. So you might still get a little bit behind on your mortgage, but you should get the claim paid out before there would be any sort of foreclosure or anything going on. So that coverage would still be there. You might just have some late fees and everything on your mortgage, but at least you would have that protection and know that after that claim is filed, when that tenant is evicted, you'll get that rent back and be able to cover that mortgage payment that you missed. So if you have any questions about this, any concerns, please let me know. I do want to say, in addition to talking about the insurance protection, I want to let you know that we are starting to make preparations for what we will have to do in the event that there was some sort of large-scale quarantine or something that took place. We're starting to make preparations for how we will deal with that. We already have our office on an appointments-only basis. We switched to that several weeks ago. We will not be doing appointments at the office unless it is basically an emergency. We won't be meeting anyone there to accept rent payments or anything like that. So please don't try to schedule appointments at the office unless it's absolutely necessary, because we most likely will not schedule one unless it is really an emergency. But in addition to that, we are doing remote showings of properties. We've always done that, but we're going to rely on that more heavily at this point. We use automated lock boxes and background screening before someone's able to do that, of course. But we're also doing self-move-ins, self-move-outs, and we have procedures in place to deal with all of this. And that is going to be ramped up, of course, so that our staff and the tenants are not having to meet each other at the property and risk any sort of contamination. Those preparations are all taking place. We're busy dealing with that, so please understand if it takes a few days for you to get a response to an email. Please understand that that's why. We're pretty busy at the moment. We're trying to prepare for what would happen if there was some sort of quarantine or more serious situation. So please understand that as we deal with that it seems to be an issue that's going on across the industry and across many industries. A lot of companies are telling employees to stay home, to not come into the office, to not leave the house, in fact. So, we're just one of many companies like that, just trying to play it safe and not making our employees go out unless absolutely necessary. But of course, we are still working. We can all work remotely. We are a heavily technology enabled company. So, everything we're able to do is basically doable from home and from on the road. So that's not going to be an issue. But just because of making all these preparations, we might take a little bit longer than usual to get back to you. So I just wanted to let you know about that. Again, if you have any questions, please send us an email. We'll get back to you, even though it might take us a little longer than usual. And if you do want that landlord protection insurance, please just reply to this email and let me know. Thanks.